Good morning and welcome back to MorningLine. I'm Matthew Torres, and with me is John Harris, the Executive Director of the Tennessee Firearms Association. Thanks so much for the calls. Let's get to the first one right now. Hey Joe, good morning. What's your question?
Well, I've got a question or two and a comment, I guess. It seems like that our legislators, I know John has been working with the Tennessee Firearms Association. Well, he started it, actually. And always the speakers they had out there would, we was supporting and even gave money to some of them's campaign. And when they got elected or whatever, they never did anything, including our governor. I kind of got disgusted with the, they come out through the meetings and tell us one thing, and then when they got elected, they didn't do anything. We hadn't been able to get anything done through the legislature to mount anything in the last few years. But that being said, I'm glad he keeps plugging away at it, trying to get something done. But it's so convoluted, these stuff that they pass or don't pass, it's unclear of what. I mean, this a lot of the laws now on the books about gun permits, they keep calling them concealed weapon permits, which it's not a concealed weapon permit. In Tennessee, it's a gun carry permit. It doesn't have to be concealed. But anyway, that being said, they had one of the stations had a thing about the signs that they post where you're not supposed to come in with a gun. And even that was convoluted, about how and what size the signs was and what it was supposed to say. And I'd like to hear him address that. And the legislators, I know he's working at it, but we're not getting much done through them. And it's a Republican legislature.
All right.
The other question I've got is reciprocal states surrounding Tennessee. Which ones is not participating with Tennessee gun?
All right, thanks for that, Joe.
Yeah, Joe covered a broad spectrum of things, and I thank him for calling in because I think I've met Joe before, pretty sure of it. Well, one question Joe had was, the last question was on the signage.
Right.
And we have a statute in Tennessee that says basically that someone who owns or controls a building, a property manager, for example, a tenant, can post the property, no guns allowed. And when that law first went on the books, we've had it at least 25 years.
I recall something about this because it's not just a sign that you can say no guns.
Right.
You got to have specific things on this.
It has to be very specific in terms of what it says, what it looks like, and how big it is, and where it is.
Flush out all the details now.
Right. What we had initially was, when I started doing this, the law said you could post or announce. So literally, the property owner could just announce. There wasn't a requirement for a sign at all. And if you violated that announcement, then it was a Class B misdemeanor. You could be arrested, fined, and spend up to 6 months in jail. And then the legislature said, wait a minute, we're not going to let you just announce it. You're going to have to put a sign up. And you're going to have to put the sign up at every public entrance. And so then we started having these signage requirements, and initially the signage requirements didn't say how big it had to be. They said what it had to have on it, some specific language. But what we saw was these little, 3-inch square signs that were down in the far left-hand corner of the door. Nobody saw it because it was, I can think of one in particular, clear with white letters. And it was technically compliant with the statute, but it was practically invisible. Well, now the sign, and the law was actually passed over a year ago, but it just became effective January 1, 2019.
Oh, wow. Okay.
The new sign requirement says, it specifically says handguns, it either has to say the handguns are prohibited or that concealed handguns are permissible. okay? You don't have to have any sign at all, but if you put a sign up, it's got to either say all guns or basically no open carry. Then you have to have a circle with a handgun inside of it and a slash going from the top left corner to the bottom right corner. So they regulate everything of a firearm, you know, the universal, this is prohibited kind of sign. Right. And then at the bottom it has to give the statute number. And the news story that ran recently is that very few people who have signs up now that comply with the 2019 law. There's signs up that are non-compliant. There's signs up that say, you know, no shirt, no shoes, no guns, no weapons. Well, that doesn't meet the statute.
Do we know, I know it's still too early in the year, do we know how many businesses or places are considered non-compliant? Do you guys get, or do you know of any complaints coming in?
We get reports regularly at TFA, and when we get them, we put them both on our website and on our Facebook page. Okay. Of places that are posted. Now, I mean, there's no rhyme or reason to it. You know, movie theaters, restaurants, department stores, it can be anything. And so, for example, recently, one of the issues that was in the news was, for God knows what reason, a local radio station started posting. Well, you know, they don't have customers in the building. Usually, it's mainly either clientele, advertisers, or their radio hosts.
Yeah, it's more of a private thing. Yeah. There's no public business.
But I mean, there was backlash because, you know, there were calls for people to, you know, boycott the station and call the advertisers and complain that they were spending money with a store that prohibits, you know, gun owners exercising their rights. So it becomes very controversial. But right now, I know the stories are starting to percolate. I personally have not seen, other than on a news report, any signs that comply with the current law.
I do remember, and I think this was late last year, one of our photographers, they did a story, I think down in Murfreesboro, and he was caught up with the gun laws. Oh yeah. And so he informed the owner, he says, hey, come the next year, this is
no good,
not compliant, so you probably need to change it. Why take the extra step including the serial number? Isn't the idea of a sign of no gun?
Part of the rationale behind the serial number goes back to, it's still today, you can go into a lot of restaurants, and if the restaurant has a bar in it, you'll frequently see a sign somewhere near the bar that says it's illegal to have guns in here, it's a felony to have a gun in here. That law went away in 2010, 9 years ago. The signs are still up, you know, in a lot of restaurants. And so the reason gun owners pay attention is if the merchant puts up a sign and it meets the requirements of the law, that's a voluntary act, and we want to know it's voluntary as opposed to something that the law requires them to do. Okay, so one is we want to know who's voluntarily posting and making the decision, and that's why that language is on those signs, is to let us know that it's the voluntary posting. It's not a mandated sign because maybe it's a school.
So you're trying to differentiate.
Differentiate.
All right, let's get back to the lines. Sandy, good morning. Thanks for holding. What's your question? Cindy, excuse me.
How you doing?
Well, thank you for calling. What is your question?
I was just calling to say about a inherited weapon through the family, such as a handgun or a shotgun rifle. Do you have to re-register that weapon, you know, because family member's deceased and you got your hands on the weapon? Do you have to go and change everything because you didn't purchase it and it was in your parents' name? Do you have to go down and put that weapon in your name? Because I know I need one out in the area I'm at. And then I do know you have to get a license. And what are the requirements for carry and conceal? I know my mother had it because she carried a lot of money to the bank to drop it off at night when she closed her bar up. And she had that right to have that. So what are my requirements for inheriting a gun?
Okay.
Good question. I've never thought of that.
Neither Tennessee law nor federal law, as it's applied in Tennessee, has a requirement that a civilian have a gun if they own it registered in their name. There's no registration requirements at all in Tennessee. The only exception to that is if the weapon is one that's regulated under the National Firearms Act, which is basically a machine gun, a suppressor, a short-barreled rifle, one having a barrel less than 16 inches, or a short-barreled shotgun. You've got to pay, there's a registration required and a federal tax required typically on those. But if it's a typical handgun, rifle, or shotgun, something that you could go to Academy Sports or Bass Pro and buy, there's no registration requirements at all for those. If you inherit the gun, there's no registration requirements. You don't have to tell anybody you inherited it, just like if you inherited the China or a pocket knife. It's just it's personal property. It just transfers. Now, her other question was, what do you got to do to get a permit to carry a gun? Well, you don't have to, unlike some states, Tennessee doesn't have a permit to be an owner. So if you're just going to be the owner of the gun, you can have it, at your home, your residence, your place of business. You can take it to a gun range. You can do a lot of stuff and you don't have to have a permit. You can, under a 2014 law now in Tennessee, you can legally transport firearms, loaded or unloaded, in a personal motor vehicle, and you don't have to have a permit for that. What you have to have a permit for in Tennessee is if you want to, basically stick the gun in your pocket, in your purse, in your briefcase, put it on your hip, and carry it on your body or with you, sort of, just normal business activities like we'd stick a pocket knife. That requires taking an all-day class, roughly 8 hours, and then applying to the Tennessee Department of Safety for a carry permit. You can get that. They're good for 8 years, or you can bite the bullet and write a little bigger check, and it's a lifetime permit.
Yeah, good question regarding the transfer. And it's interesting that you compared it. It is someone's property, like as if it's someone's ring or
right. It's just
an heirloom
property
of some sort. Good question, and I know some callers are waiting, so we'll get to your questions in just a bit. So just wait a couple of minutes. We'll be back more with Open Line.